the 2023 Nissan Leaf. I'm going to take a different approach on this because this car has been around since 2011 in multiple iterations. But essentially, in Nissan years, it seems pretty normal, but for the rest of the car industry, it's nuts. It started as a noble attempt. Carlos Ghosn was at the helm at that point, and they just get it out. We need an affordable electric car for the masses. We want to be innovating. And it was a really great idea because it was a car that most people could enjoy and afford. It had the electric drivetrain, which when you drive a Rogue or some of the older Nissan products with a CVT, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. And if the car worked properly long-term, you would say, I'd want a cheap electric car. But the Nissan Leaf was saddled with a couple big mistakes, and it's widely known, but a lot of it was the engineering team did not have a lot of budget. This car was built to a price point, and they made the cardinal sin of electrification, that is throwing a battery pack that wasn't all that well designed into a space that was largely wasted, and then having no thermal management of the battery. And even to this day, they did not do that, even in 2023. They did update the battery pack, the long-range battery pack for the 2023 model year in 2024 to give you a 60 kilowatt hour pack. And some of that is battery formulation changes by necessity. It replaces the 62 kilowatt hour long-range pack, and they still have the shorter range pack that you can get. But still today, the batteries are not cooled and they're not heated. They do have a PTC heater or a heat pump that they added in 2013, but essentially, this car's changes were mostly in the battery control module, in software side, to try to limp the car along to make sure that it didn't destroy itself. And when I say destroy itself, this car was one of the reasons why people became electric phobic. In 2011 and 2013, 2014, 2015, people were literally killing the battery packs from just driving them. Because with no thermal management, you could go on a road trip, and if you have a car that only has like 75 to 100 miles range, clearly you're going to have to charge it on the way there, and you're going to have to plan it around a DC fast charger, which is what Leaf owners did. And in the heat, if you're driving this car to empty, the pack is already over its temperature range. Then you're DC fast charging it, throwing a lot of power into it, driving it again, and draining the battery pack. So what you're seeing today and what you were seeing then is if you look at a lot of the used ones on the market, even with a full battery, it might only have 20 miles of range, 20 miles usable. And that's because they included a gauge to show you battery health, battery longevity in 12 bars. And once you got down to like 5 or 6 bars, the battery was junk. And so this became the huge issue. And one of the other big problems is if you're going to push the agenda of electric cars being replacements for internal combustion, they did all the typical green stuff. The interior space was all recycled material, or most of the car could be recycled. But then they didn't offer a battery refurbishment program, which makes absolutely no sense. So you had owners with batteries out of warranty looking for the short range or the long range battery, and they'd go to Nissan and it was $10,000 or $15,000 for a pack. And nobody can afford that, so you have a car that's going to go to the junkyard. So what's happened is you have people dedicating their businesses to figuring out how to keep Leafs on the road. And you might ask why people would want this. It's because they made 500,000 of these. That's globally. And a lot of the people that bought them knew they wanted a cheap car, and there's nothing wrong with them long term. It's just the batteries go bad because they're fairly reliable outside of that, other than, some of the AC to DC converter issues, but a lot of that was a simple fix. So people want to keep these cars on the road. And then in the used market, you could find them for under $5,000. And if you can have a company that could give you a way to swap packs from the junkyard, you could have a really cheap, affordable car that you could keep on the road with some of the software revisions that have come out. People know how to drive these. You could get 100 miles range, charge them, and never have to put fuel in them or really do any maintenance on them. So that's why they've remained popular. But it's just a sad case of, it's a great idea in theory, unless you're a company that doesn't have the long-term vision to make that work. And Nissan they weren't committed to it, and I think it really hurt them as a brand. And it's kind of a cautionary tale of other brands looking at this long-term. How do you keep people invested, and how do you keep people invested in a car that they know they can keep, that they're not going to have to worry about? And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Let's take this for a drive, and we're going to see how it holds up as a 2024 model year Nissan Leaf. Oh man, yeah, that's a fucking beauty right there.
It's a Mitsubishi, Mark. Those are real cars, not this Nissan. And you put it in sport.
I'm going to turn this off for a
And you
second.
can turn my HVAC. But I'm not going to be comfortable anymore in my Leaf.
Jack, are you ready to transform the landscape into an eco-friendly universe?
Yeah, Marker. Is there a sport mode in this thing?
I'll turn eco mode off.
Oh, perfect. Ooh, yeah.
So I'm going to be honest, the chances of somebody ever doing what I just did, pushing the pedal to the ground like that in a Leaf, is pretty low. We know what this car is about. It's about one thing. It's about going as slow as possible.
In the left lane.
No, hopefully not. And getting the most efficiency possible out of an appliance that you should probably never have to spend $1 on, hopefully, other than home charging.
And your Farm and Fleet tires.
And your Farm and Fleet tires. You want to get the cheapest 16,000 treadwear tire that'll last 1,700 years. So there's really a couple different driving modes here. There's one pedal driving, which personally you're going to use on this car because the regen does help efficiency. I hate it. I turn it off because I don't care. I don't own it. And then there's eco mode, which is like hitting a brick wall when you turn it on, and it does.
That was amazing.
But look at the range difference: 218, 231.
Huh.
So eco mode dulls.
It does literally though feel like you just hit something.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, it dulls the throttle, right? I mean, it makes sense. It's limiting power output a little bit, like in the lower stages of the pedal travel. So this is what you're doing. You're taking, well, we're in the extended range version, the new extended range version with the 60 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is a little bit less than the previous long range version, but the battery chemistry is supposed to be more resilient to temperature fluctuations. So now that you get over that, what is left to talk about here, Jack, is
the dynamics, clearly.
The dynamics. And that's the funny part about this car, I'm going to be honest, because the tires don't work at all. I mean, they're eco tires, they're low rolling resistance for best fuel economy possible, but the funny part is when we get into the real handling part of this, the acceleration with the extended range pack and the higher horsepower, because this is over 200 horsepower, it's brisk enough, honestly. Nobody's going to complain about the power. It's just as good, if not better, than any other shitty Eco 4-cylinder that you're going to buy that's rattly and
like a Sentra or something.
Yeah, or like even like the Turbo 4s and the Toyotas, right? They're really rattly. This eliminates all that, and it feels like a much calmer, smoother experience. But ride quality is okay. Mm-hmm. There's laminated glass in the front windshield, so it's pretty quiet overall for what this is at this price point. Because you got to think about, really, this is essentially a $20,000 car, the way that it was designed. So the ride refinement, even though it's got a torsion beam in the rear end, it's still pretty compliant. It's on the softer side. It's a car that you can drive and comfortably turn your brain off. The audio system is also surprisingly not horrible, given there's literally two speakers in the front and the door of mid-range.
They both have like a UE boom and someone found in a garbage
it really
can.
is better than the Fords we just drove with the Bang & Olufsen. I mean, like, overall, the package and how everything works inside is really easy to use and non-frustrating. I mean, clearly you are not driving this car hard, and I think the one turn-off to me is driving this car, you realize how little time they spent in calibration of the stability control and all of that. It's essentially, because it's front wheel drive only, if you turn the wheel and accelerate, it has horrible torque steer. It's doing this when you're accelerating, left and right, and the stability control system and traction control system, namely on a corner, will do this. On, off, and then the wheel's tugging as it's giving. It's horrible. They probably had like two guys working on it that didn't want
break.
And they never fixed it. They're just like, it is what it is. Nobody's going to care. And to me, that's really sums up a lot of what they did with this car since it's been released. They made incremental changes, and they're just leaving it to the people that are going to go smooth, light throttle, straight, just never turn the wheel. And even the thing like the brake pedal. The brake pedal is one of the funniest things, and obviously you're going to be driving in one pedal mode, but the brake pedal is... It feels like a bass drum pedal on a drum kit. And
don't worry about it.
A double bass pedal. I found myself at a stoplight practicing my swivel motion for double bass because it has the same reactivity as a bass pedal on a bass drum. It is so spring-loaded. Obviously, it's brake-by-wire. It's not... But you can... That's me, like, kicking it to the floor. It doesn't do a thing until the ABS is like, oh, maybe this guy wants to stop like 10 minutes later. So it's really funny to me how they set this car up. It really is ridiculous.
Well, this is the best and the worst of Nissan, right? They innovated early, but they rushed this thing out because the CEO wanted it done yesterday for no money.
Right.
Then they sent it to market, and then it just sat for like 15 years with incremental changes they could do for $3.
Yep.
And then the buying public of this car, the nuts, love this thing, have tried to keep it alive. That is this car in a nutshell.
100%. The pros are, it's a really comfortable, like it does everything pretty well from just an appliance car. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're coming home and you only have like, even with the extended range, literally, 200 miles is not bad for the price of this. But the problem is everybody's caught up to their what they're doing. Like, I would have a Kona over this as a new car because the Kona is.
Oh, this thing feels 15 years old.
God, it feels so old compared to that. But again, as I talked about in the shop, you're not buying this as a new car experience. You're going to find an older model because they're essentially all the same. I really like it. If you were getting this
for like 10 grand.
10 grand, and you could find some that are really low miles. Like, if you look at the used market right now, you can find 2020s for under $20,000.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy how cheap these things are. So if you like small cars, you live in a city, you like the electric part of it, cool car. But I don't know. It's a weird time for electric cars, and this is kind of a good example of that.
So, Mark, with that, let's head into the final thoughts, sir.
All right. Here we are at the end of the line, the 2024 Nissan Leaf. I think they're going to keep this alive for maybe another year or two max. So what did we take away? Well, as a new car, it's definitely not worth it unless you're getting it for nothing. As a used car, it's a lot more interesting. You can see from the owner base how much passion people have for keeping it alive. From the engineering on the side, the companies that have kicked up to keep these cars going and alive with newer battery packs, newer software, and of course, companies that are literally making new battery packs for it. That to me is telling that people are hungry for an affordable, small electric car. And that's what they did well. They kind of kicked that off. Unfortunately, Nissan hasn't spent a lot of money or energy kind of playing into that. And I hope in the future that some of these companies get smarter. Not everybody wants like a $60,000, $70,000 or luxury car experience. They just want something basic, and this fulfills all of that. Is it flawed? 100%. There's no way I'd recommend buying this new. There's just absolutely no way. But as a used proposition, if you're really into electric cars and you like to tinker, I think there's a lot to like here, but also a lot to hate. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.